I was standing in my tiny Boise apartment bathroom at 3 a.m., shaking so hard my teeth clicked. My son was finally asleep after screaming for 2 hours straight, and I was staring at myself in the mirror, trying to figure out how the hell I had become this version of me, sweaty, exhausted, crying without even realizing it. And then my phone buzzed again. Another text from my mother-in-law. "You're exaggerating. It's not that hard. I had 4 kids and I never complained." My hands curled around the sink so tight my fingertips went white. I could still hear her voice from earlier that day, that smug little laugh she does when she thinks she's being charming. She'd said it right in front of my husband, right in front of me, while I was barely functioning and fighting back tears. And my husband, he had just shrugged and muttered, "She's just old school, babe, don't take it personally." Old school apparently meant dismissing me like I was some dramatic child, not a woman bleeding, shaking, trying to feed a newborn with cracked nipples and no sleep for 3 days. So at 3 a.m., in that bathroom, with the fan buzzing and the night pressing against the window, something in me snapped in a way I didn't even recognize. Not angry, not screaming, just done. A clean, cold kind of done. I opened my laptop. I typed out everything, every thought I wasn't supposed to say. Every moment I sat on the floor with my shirt half open, crying because I couldn't get my baby to latch. Every panic attack at 2 a.m. Every time I felt like I was drowning while everyone around me said, "You should be grateful." I wrote about my mother-in-law, the way she bragged about her perfect motherhood while ignoring my pain. The way she dismissed my postpartum depression like it was a personality flaw. The way she made everything about her nostalgia while I was actively breaking. I didn't use names. I didn't reference anyone directly. I just wrote the truth. By the time the sun started to rise, I had a 17-page post, raw, shaky, and way too honest. I created a throwaway account and posted it in a parenting forum I barely ever used. I hit submit with the same numbness I felt walking into the hospital to give birth. I didn't expect anything. Maybe 5 comments. Maybe someone would say, "I get you." That was all I wanted. But when I checked again mid-morning, after finally getting 2 hours of sleep, the post had blown up. Not just comments. Thousands, people sharing it, people quoting it. People saying, "This is exactly what happened to me." I felt exposed and safe at the same time, like I had ripped open my chest, but everyone else was holding theirs too. And then, that afternoon, while I was sitting on the couch with my son asleep on my chest, my phone rang. My mother-in-law. Her voice was shaking so hard I barely recognized it. "I just read this post, this story, and I think it's about me," she said. Then she started crying. Real, heavy crying, like the kind you hear when someone finally realizes the damage they caused. I didn't say anything at first. I just listened to her sob. After everything she'd said to me, everything she'd dismissed, it felt strange hearing her break like that. Then she whispered, "Why would you do this?" And all I said, quietly, was, "Now you understand what it feels like to hear the truth too late." She sucked in a breath like I'd punched her. And that's where everything really began, because what she said next changed everything. Before everything blew up, before I was the woman typing in the dark while my baby snored on my chest, my relationship with my mother-in-law looked fine. Not warm, not loving, but manageable. She lived 20 minutes away on the outskirts of Boise, in a beige ranch house full of crocheted blankets and framed pictures of her 4 kids lined up like trophies. She liked control. She liked being right. She liked being the matriarch, capital M. I learned all that pretty early on, but I ignored the red flags because my husband, Mark, insisted she meant well. He'd grown up in that house, under her voice, under her rules, so he didn't see the undertone I felt every time she looked at me. The judgment, the silent comparisons, the subtle digs disguised as advice. When I got pregnant, all those things ramped up. Suddenly she became the self-appointed guide of my pregnancy, even though I never asked for help. She'd bring over books from the 80s, outdated pamphlets, and random old wives' tales she swore were basically science. If I didn't follow her advice, she'd make this little clicking sound with her tongue, like she was disappointed but too polite to say it outright. But she wasn't too polite. She just waited until Mark was around to deliver the real comments. "You're gaining a lot of weight. I never gained that much with any of mine. Are you sure you should be resting this much? Pregnancy isn't an illness. You're very sensitive lately. It's probably hormones, but still." And Mark would just shrug. "She's old school," he'd say. She doesn't mean anything by it. I heard that so many times it stopped sounding like English, but the real trouble started after the birth. My labor was rough, 20 hours, Pitocin, then an emergency C-section when the baby's heart rate dropped. I remember shaking so hard afterward the nurse had to hold my hand to keep the IV from slipping. My son was healthy, which I was grateful for, but I felt like my body had been carved open and left to figure itself out alone. But my mother-in-law, she walked into my hospital room like she was checking into a hotel. She barely looked at me. Instead, she beelined to the baby, cooing over him like she'd just won a prize. "You should be up and moving already," she chirped less than 24 hours after surgery. When I had my last kid, I walked out of the hospital the next morning. She said it loud enough for the nurses to hear, loud enough for Mark to hear, loud enough to make my face burn even though I could barely sit up. Over the next few weeks, she weaponized every moment. Every time I cried from exhaustion, "Motherhood is hard, get used to it." Every time breastfeeding failed, "You're not trying enough." Every time I showed any anxiety, "New moms today are too emotional." And Mark stayed neutral, detached, like his main job was to keep peace between us instead of supporting the woman bleeding through pads twice a day and trying not to fall apart. The thing is, I didn't hate her then. Not yet. I thought she was tone-deaf, stubborn, maybe a little ego-driven. But I didn't think she was cruel. I didn't think she was capable of the level of coldness that would eventually push me to write 17 pages at 3 a.m. That belief shattered the day she made the comment, "It's not that hard. I had 4 kids without complaining," and looked at me like she had won something. She didn't know it then, but that sentence cracked something open in me that would never close again. And what she told me during that phone call, through tears, revealed a past I never knew, and a reason that made everything worse. The day after she made that "I had 4 kids without complaining" comment, something shifted in the air between us. It wasn't loud or obvious. It was this quiet, electric tension, like the kind you feel right before a storm breaks over the valley. And honestly, I thought maybe she'd back off. Maybe she'd realize she crossed a line. But instead, she doubled down. She started showing up at our place without warning. Not knocking, just letting herself in because family doesn't need invitations. I'd be pacing the living room with my son screaming on my shoulder, hair unwashed, wearing the same leggings from 3 days ago, and she'd stroll in with a grocery bag like she was hosting some 1950s sitcom. And every visit ended the same way, with her doing this overly cheerful commentary about how she used to manage everything effortlessly. "I don't know why he cries so much with you. Mine were always calm when I picked them up. You should really be keeping the house tidier. Mess makes babies anxious. Are you sure you're bonding? You don't look as connected as I did with my kids." That one almost made me collapse. I remember leaning on the counter, breathing through the sting in my chest while she walked around the living room straightening cushions like she owned the place. But the worst part wasn't her. It was Mark. Because every time I tried to bring it up, he'd rub his face and mumble the same line. "She's old school, don't escalate it." He didn't see escalation. He saw a mother who raised 4 kids and believed she knew best. I saw someone slowly slicing me open with help that felt like judgment sharpened into knives. The breaking point for me came 2 weeks before the night I wrote the post. It was late afternoon. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours. My C-section scar was burning. My son wouldn't latch no matter how many positions the lactation consultant had shown me, and I was sitting on the couch topless, holding him awkwardly and crying silently because even blinking hurt. My mother-in-law came in again without knocking and froze when she saw me. "Why are you crying now?" she asked. Not gently, not curious, just irritated. I tried to explain, but she cut me off with that same smug nostalgia voice. "You're making this way harder than it needs to be. I never had these emotional breakdowns." I stared at her. She looked at my son, at my chest, at my swollen eyes, like she was tallying all the ways I wasn't measuring up. Then she said it. "Honestly, some women just aren't natural mothers." Mark walked in 30 seconds later. I was shaking. He saw it. But when I told him what she'd said, he just sighed heavily, like I was the problem, and said, "She didn't mean it like that. She just has no filter." That night, after he fell asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling with this awful realization sinking into my bones. Nobody was coming to help me. Not him, not her, not anyone. And when that thought settled, something dark and hard formed inside me. Not hate, not revenge, just this deep, cold survival instinct. The sense that if I didn't start fighting for myself, I was going to disappear into the exhaustion and guilt. So I stopped letting her in. I locked the door. I ignored calls. I told Mark he could visit her alone. He got angry. She got offended. Both of them acted like I was dramatic. And then came the afternoon she read the viral post. And what she said through the tears, that confession she unloaded, wasn't an apology. It was a secret, a disturbing one. One that made me rethink everything I thought I knew about her, about Mark, about their whole family. When my mother-in-law called crying after reading the post, I honestly expected some kind of defensive meltdown. I thought she'd accuse me of humiliating her. I thought she'd rant about respect. I thought she'd deny everything. But instead, she sounded terrified. Not guilty, not ashamed, terrified. Her voice was shaking so badly I could hear her breath hitch with every word. "I know that post was about me," she whispered. "But you don't understand. You don't know what happened when I had my kids. None of you do." I stayed quiet. Part of me didn't care about her backstory. Another part, the one still raw and bleeding inside, wanted to hear her say she was wrong. Then she said something I never expected. "Your husband doesn't know the truth about how he was raised. None of my kids do." My stomach dropped. She kept going, words tumbling out like stones she'd been holding for decades. When I said I never complained, that wasn't pride. That was survival. I couldn't complain. I wasn't allowed. I frowned, confused. "What do you mean not allowed?" And then she said the sentence that changed everything. "Your father-in-law didn't let me speak about pain. Not during pregnancy. Not after birth. Not ever." I felt my skin prickle. She was crying harder now, ugly crying, gasping for air. "He told me suffering quietly made me a real mother. He said complaining made women weak. And every time I struggled, he'd punish me for it. Not physically, he didn't need to. He'd take things away, money, help, respect. He'd humiliate me in front of the kids. He'd tell them I was dramatic, that I made everything up." I didn't know what to say. This wasn't the direction I expected, at all. She kept going, words spilling faster like she was afraid I'd hang up. "When Mark was born, I hemorrhaged," she said. "I was so dizzy I thought I was dying. But he stood there at the foot of the bed and told the nurses not to coddle me. I begged for help, and he told them I was exaggerating, so I stopped. Completely. I shut my mouth and did everything silently because if I didn't, he'd punish me afterward." My throat tightened. I felt sick. "And now," she cried, "when I see you struggling, it brings everything back. And instead of helping, I hear his voice. I repeat what he used to say to me. I know it's wrong. I know it hurts you. But I don't know how to stop acting like I'm still living in his house." I sat frozen on the couch. My baby slept on my chest, oblivious. The room felt too quiet, like the air was holding its breath. "So yes," she whispered, "I was cruel to you, but I wasn't trying to be your enemy. I was trying to be the mother I was trained to be, the mother who never complained, never cried, never asked for help, because he made me believe that was the only way to deserve anything." I didn't know what to feel. Sympathy, anger, disgust. None of it fit right, because even though her story was heartbreaking, something about it felt off. Too rehearsed, too vague, like she was leaving something out. And I didn't realize how big that missing piece was until later that night, when I told Mark what she confessed. He looked at me with this blank, unreadable expression. Then he said quietly, "That's not the whole story." I felt my stomach twist. "What do you mean it's not the whole story?" I asked. He stared at the wall for a long time before answering. And when he finally spoke, I learned the real betrayal. One his mother had conveniently left out was even darker. When Mark said, "That's not the whole story," something cold slid down my spine. He wasn't defensive, he wasn't angry, he wasn't even surprised. He just looked hollow, like someone who'd been holding a secret so long it had carved itself into him. He sat down at the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the carpet like it was safer than looking at me. "I heard things growing up," he said quietly. "Things my dad said to her, things she said when she didn't think I was listening. I knew he was controlling, but that story she told you. She left out the part where she agreed with him." I frowned. "Agreed how?" He finally looked at me, and there was this haunted mix of resentment and resignation in his eyes. "My mom wasn't just repeating what he said," he whispered. "She believed it. She still does. She used to tell my sister that women who ask for help are weak. She used to say postpartum depression was a made-up excuse for bad mothers. She didn't just suffer under his rules, she carried them forward. She enforced them. My chest tightened. Mark wasn't defending her, he was exposing her. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" I asked. He rubbed his face. "Because it's complicated. And I didn't want you to think differently of her." "But I should think differently," I snapped. "She's been tearing me apart for months." He didn't argue. And that's when the anger hit me, not a screaming anger, not a chaotic one. A cold, steady burn. Something sharp and focused. Like all the exhaustion and hurt had finally solidified into clarity. Because here's what I realized. His mother didn't treat me like this because she was traumatized. She treated me like this because she believed she was right. And that made everything I'd written in that forum not just justified, but necessary. The post going viral had already shaken her. It forced her to see herself the way the world did, not the way she'd always imagined. But now I understood something deeper. She still thought of herself as a victim, not a perpetrator. Even in her confession, she framed everything around what happened to her, not what she did to me or to her own kids. She apologized for her pain, not for her cruelty. So I knew I needed to do more, not out of spite. Not to humiliate her, but because every woman in that family, past, present, and future, deserved the truth spelled out plainly. I started planning, not revenge in the dramatic sense, not screaming matches or public fights. Something quieter, sharper, more permanent. I dug through journals, notes on my phone, texts. I saved receipts of every moment she minimized my pain, every time she blamed me for struggling, every time she used her old-school philosophy to justify cutting me down. I gathered everything into a single document, not to publish, not to expose her online, but to make sure there was a record she couldn't dismiss or rewrite. And then I started writing again, not a forum post this time. A detailed, private account of what postpartum had really been like. Raw, specific, factual, not for strangers, for Mark, for her, for anyone who tried to twist the story later. Because something inside me knew the truth was going to matter more than I realized then. Later that week, while I was organizing the timeline, I noticed something strange in the dates Mark mentioned about his childhood. Something that didn't line up with the story his mom told. Something that pointed to an entirely different truth. A truth that explained why she reacted so violently to my struggles. A truth that Mark had avoided telling me for months. And when he finally admitted it, everything clicked into place. Everything? Mark didn't tell me the missing piece right away. For a few days, he walked around the apartment like he was carrying something radioactive in his chest. Quiet, distracted, apologetic in small ways that didn't match his usual patterns. He'd make dinner without being asked. He'd take the baby at night. He'd check on me during breastfeeding without the usual glazed-over look. It was like he suddenly saw me for the first time. But underneath, all that was this tension that kept building, like he knew the truth was about to come out whether he wanted it to or not. It finally broke one night around 11 p.m., after the baby had finally gone down and the house was still. I was on the couch sorting through more notes for the timeline I was building, something between a journal and a record, and Mark sat across from me, fidgeting with the drawstring on his sweatpants. "I need to tell you something," he said softly. I didn't respond. I waited. He took a deep breath, eyes dropping to the floor. "You know how my mom said she wasn't allowed to complain, and how she said your struggles bring all of that back?" His voice shook a little. "She left out the part where she wasn't the only one silenced." My stomach tensed. "What do you mean?" He swallowed hard. "She didn't just stay quiet about her pain. She stayed quiet about ours." I blinked. "Yours?" And then he told me something so heavy, so unexpected, it felt like the room tilted. "When I was a baby," he said, "I had issues, like real issues, weight loss, dehydration. I was sick a lot. My mom struggled with breastfeeding too, but she never told anyone. Not the doctor, not her family, not even my dad. She didn't want him to think she was weak." My mouth went dry. "She used to hide the formula cans," he continued. "She'd breastfeed until I screamed myself hoarse because she thought supplementing was failure. Eventually, I got so weak they hospitalized me, and even then she told them it was just a stomach bug. She wouldn't admit anything. She refused help so aggressively the nurses thought something was wrong with her." I stared at him, speechless. He rubbed his hands over his face. "My dad wasn't the only one policing her suffering. She policed herself. and she pushed it onto us. There's this photo of me at 5 months old. I look tiny, like I missed a month of growing. Every time I asked her about it growing up, she'd bite my head off. She'd say I was being dramatic. He looked at me then, eyes raw. And when our son had trouble latching and you were crying and everything felt hard, she wasn't remembering her own pain. She was remembering mine. She saw you struggling and it made her furious because she refused to struggle publicly. She forced silence on herself, so she forced it on you. A chill crawled through me. He wasn't done. She read your post, and she didn't cry because she hurt you. She cried because she felt exposed. Because for the first time someone else said out loud what she spent decades burying. My heart beat hard, slow, heavy. Then Mark said the part that knocked the breath out of me. She didn't just minimize your pain, she minimized mine my whole life, and she still doesn't think she did anything wrong. The air went still. Everything suddenly made sense, not just her cruelty, but her panic, her tears, her frantic attempt to redirect the narrative toward her own suffering. She wasn't afraid of being misunderstood. She was afraid of being seen. And the more Mark talked, the clearer it became. His mother's entire identity was built on silence. Mine was becoming built on telling the truth. Those two worlds couldn't exist together. And the final piece, the one that chilled me the most, was what Mark said last. My mom is already trying to tell my siblings her version of the story. She's twisting your post. She's spinning everything to make herself the victim. And if we don't do something, she'll rewrite all of this. That was the moment I realized what had to happen next. Not just for me, but for him, and for our son. I thought I understood her. I thought the pieces we had were enough to explain the cruelty, the dismissiveness, the judgment, the way she acted like my pain was an inconvenience she had to step around. I thought it came from trauma, conditioning, survival. But the truth, her truth, was darker than all of that. It wasn't about pain. It wasn't about the past. It wasn't even about motherhood. It was about power. I didn't fully see it until the next morning, when she showed up at our apartment without calling. Mark opened the door before I could get there. I heard her voice drifting down the hall, shaky but controlled, like she'd spent the whole night practicing a speech in the mirror. "I want to talk to her," she said. "Alone." I walked into the living room with our son on my hip. She looked at me with red eyes, but there was something tight behind them. Too stiff, too careful. "I told you everything," she said softly, "and I hope you understand why I acted the way I did." I didn't respond. Then it happened, the shift. Her voice dropped into this low, sharp tone I'd never heard before. "But you posting that, you shouldn't have done that. You embarrassed me, you made me look like a bad mother." There it was, not regret, not hurt, image management. My stomach tightened. "I didn't use your name. No one knows it was you." "That's not the point," she snapped. "People like you read these forums, people in town, women talk, stories get around." She stepped forward with this eerie calm. "You took something private and made it public. And now I have to fix it before it gets out of hand." My blood ran cold. "Fix it how?" She looked me dead in the eyes, and the mask came off completely. "I've already spoken to the family," she said. "I told them you've been having episodes, emotional problems. That postpartum hit you harder than you want to admit." My stomach dropped. "I told them you're overwhelmed," she continued, "and that you sometimes get confused about what people say. It's better this way, better for everyone to believe you're struggling than to think I'm a bad mother." I swear the room tilted. She wasn't trying to protect herself from the past. She was trying to control the story now. "This is exactly what I mean," she added, voice softening like she was offering comfort. "You're a good mom, but you're fragile. You feel things too deeply. You overreact. Women like you need guidance. Women like you, weak, emotional. Hysterical, that was the subtext. That was always the subtext." She wasn't repeating things her husband once said. She believed them. And she wielded them like weapons, not to survive, to dominate. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a hiss. "I will not let you make me look like a monster, and I will not let my family turn against me because of your feelings." My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From understanding. She wasn't scared of the truth. She was scared of losing control. Every insult, every dismissal, every "I had 4 kids without complaining" wasn't an accident. It wasn't trauma leaking out. It was a worldview, a doctrine she enforced. Motherhood to her wasn't nurturing or loving, it was authority. And she saw my pain, my real, raw, human pain, as a threat to the mythology she built around herself. She needed me to be the weak one. She needed me to be the problem. She needed me silent, just like she silenced Mark, just like she silenced his sister, just like she silenced herself so long she forgot where the lie ended and she began. Her reason wasn't a tragic wound. It was a cold, calculated truth. If the women around her were hurting, she needed them to hide it, so she could keep pretending she never had. She didn't want to be a good mother. She wanted to be the best mother. The legendary one. The one no one could criticize without looking crazy. And she was willing to rewrite my reality to protect that illusion. That was the moment I stopped feeling guilty. Stopped feeling conflicted. Stopped feeling anything soft toward her at all. Because once you see someone clearly, you can't unsee it. And what I saw was a woman who had built her identity on the silence of others, and who thought she could force me into silence too. She had no idea what was coming. The moment she said, "I told the family you're having emotional episodes," something in me clicked into place. Not rage, not panic, just clarity. A clean, steady line running straight through my spine. She thought she could rewrite my life the same way she rewrote hers. She thought she could twist my reality and walk away untouched. She thought I was just another woman she could silence. She didn't realize I had already stopped being afraid of her weeks ago. I shifted my son to my other arm and said, calm as stone, "Mark, come here." He walked in from the hallway, face pale. He'd heard everything. His mom stiffened. "Mark, she's twisting." "No," he said, voice low. "I heard it." Silence. She looked between us, panic flickering behind her eyes. She wasn't crying anymore. She wasn't apologizing. She was calculating. Watching her power slip grain by grain, I turned to Mark. "You tell her, right now, we're done with her being in this house without permission. We're done with the comments, the manipulation, the lies to your family." He nodded. "Mom, you need to go. And you're not coming back until you take responsibility for what you've done." She stared at him like he'd slapped her. "Responsibility? For what? Telling the truth? Helping you too? Being the only one holding this family together?" Mark didn't flinch. "No, for controlling everyone, for hurting everyone, for rewriting things you didn't want to face." Her face twisted, not with pain but with disbelief, like she couldn't process the idea of losing control of him. Then she did what manipulators always do when the mask slips. "Fine," she snapped. "If you want to throw me away, go ahead, but don't expect the rest of the family to take your side." I almost felt sorry for her, almost. Because she didn't know yet. I had already made sure no one could twist the narrative again. After she stormed out, Mark sank onto the couch. He looked defeated but lighter somehow, like a weight had been ripped off him. I sat beside him and told him what I had been working on: the document, the timeline, the collection of texts, dates, quotes, every single moment she tried to undermine me. At first he looked overwhelmed. Then relieved. He said, "I want the truth out, for my siblings, for our son. I'm tired of pretending she's someone she's not." So together we wrote an email. We didn't attack, we didn't insult, we didn't dramatize. We told the truth, point by point, calm and factual. What she said, what she did, what she tried to rewrite, and how her behavior lined up perfectly with the stories he remembered from his childhood. We attached the document. We sent it to every adult in his family. No embellishment, no venom, just reality presented plainly, finally, without her filter. And for the first time in that family's entire history, the silence broke. One by one, they responded. Some shocked, some angry, some relieved. His sister wrote a long message saying she had always felt something was wrong but never had the words to describe it. His younger brother admitted he always thought their mom was too perfect to question. Nobody defended her, not one. In the following weeks, she tried to spin things, calls, guilt trips, dramatic speeches, but no one bought it. Her power dissolved the moment the truth became communal instead of private. And I didn't have to scream, I didn't have to fight dirty, I didn't have to humiliate her online. I just had to stop letting her decide which version of reality we lived in. My revenge wasn't loud. It was clean. It was honest. It was permanent. Months later, I'm finally breathing again. My son sleeps better. Mark sees me in a way he never did before. And the house feels peaceful, like we finally cleared out a shadow that had been sitting in the corners for years. Sometimes people think revenge has to be dramatic, explosive, vengeful, but sometimes the most devastating revenge is the truth delivered too late for the villain to stop it. And when I think about her reading the family's replies, Realizing her version isn't the one anyone believes anymore, I feel something I haven't felt in a long time. Closure. And that, honestly, feels better than anything I could have yelled at her face.